Hello and welcome to the Power of Passive Investing. We have a very interesting guest today, as always, you may say, but uh, Clint and I had a chance to connect earlier where Clint actually, along with his partner Neil, had interviewed me on their podcast. And I enjoyed that interview so much that I decided to invite both of them to be interviewed on my webinar series, even though I'm doing the interviews separately because each of them, Clint and Neil, have very interesting personalities, amazing journeys, and I wanted our listeners to hear from each of them separately and to learn more about each of them. So, without further ado, Clint, welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you making the time for this today. I'm excited to connect again.
Nice, thank you. Please share with our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got to the point where you're at today.
Sure. My name is Clint Harris. I'm 42 years old, married for 13 years. I've got two little boys, ages 5 and 2. We live on a little island outside of Wilmington, North Carolina called Carolina Beach. I had a 16-year career in medical sales coming out of college. I did some additional training and began implanting pacemakers and defibrillators. So I spent 16 years doing that as a clinical and then a trainer and then sales rep. And then eventually, after 11 years in Columbia, South Carolina, I relocated to Wilmington, North Carolina to grow the territory there. During that time period, it became pretty evident to me early on that medical sales is kind of a young man's game. It's a lot of, as you can imagine, heart problems are not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of travel, a lot of being on call, getting called at 2 or 3 in the morning up to a couple hours away in any direction. So um, it was a lot, right? So I I believe that for the vast majority of people, the ability for us to save our way to retirement has largely been taken away from us. I think my parents and my grandparents could save their way to retirement with, a factory job and a 401k and a pension and social security and get the whole gold watch and all that. And I believe that that's largely been taken away. So I think the sooner I realized that for myself, it put me in a position where I can't play defense and get where I want to be. I have to play offense. And so, fairly early on, that started my real estate investing journey in my mid 20s, which eventually led to where we are now.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you so much. And tell our audience a little bit about where you're at now and what do you do now.
So I'll tell you where I am now by telling you what I did wrong. I originally started buying single family homes. I accidentally bird a few of those properties, but I realized fairly quickly it's a very slow way to get ahead. One of the things I did right was that my first house was a duplex. I lived in one half, rented out the other. Thought I invented this concept and was a genius when I was 25. Turns out people have been doing it for thousands of years, now commonly known as house hacking. So that allowed me to have the liquidity options of buying small single family homes in the post 2008 crash. Uh, when I moved to Wilmington in 2017, that's when I really started educating myself through podcasts and using that windshield time. And that led to our journey of, I remembered that first house hack. So we bought a duplex at the beach, 2 blocks off the water. We
Nice.
moved into one half, which is a 3 bed, 2 bath. We started
Mhm.
running the other half on Airbnb. And we did just under 60,000 our first summer. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, this is real money. It's paying the mortgage, taxes, insurance, utilities. And on top of that, obviously seasonal, but over a yearly average, we were getting paid $1,400 a month to live 2 blocks from the ocean. And I was like,
Amazing.
okay, we can do this again. So we bought a quadplex after that and converted all those 4 units to Airbnbs. And then we bought another quadplex and then another
Wow.
quadplex. That turned into wanting to hire a property management company and not finding anybody that could get the same numbers that we were getting by using a very data-driven feedback loop approach. So we had to build a company. So I spent 2 years building out a property management company. It currently operates my 14 listings and about another 70 on top of that.
Wow.
I
Nice.
hired myself out of that company. I'm basically a silent partner now with partners that are significantly better operators than I am, which is humbling, but it's the truth. Um, and it was at that point that I realized I had been doing things wrong. And you and I were speaking in the green room before we started the recording that I was so focused on financial independence and replacing my income that when I did that and I replaced the income that I was still making by doing surgery at the hospital, but I was still basically tied to my phone. And when I wasn't on call at the hospital, I was on call with my properties or on call managing the managers of the company that we had built.
Sure.
And I didn't have location independence. I still had to be in town, especially during peak season, dealing with what we wanted. And it was at that point that I realized uh, what I really wanted, what my wife and I wanted together with the goals for our family, was financial time and location independence together, which we call freedom of purpose. That financial independence by itself is a very shallow goal once you achieve it and you look around and you still can't go
Mhm.
anywhere. You still basically have just created a job for yourself.
Yep.
I had a mental shift and I began the aggressive pursuit of all passive strategies that I could find. The way that I did that was by identifying a group of older, more successful investors, men and women, that I thought had done it right. They could go on the 4 or 5 week boat trips. They could drop anything to take care of a family member that really needed them. They had the ability to be location independent. And so I asked them, you know, what are the assets that you find yourself in? We all have this career trajectory of being real estate investors. Where do you land that gives
Yep.
you what you really want in life?
Love
And
it.
it came down to three things, and it was mobile home parks.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I was burned out on tenants because Airbnbs have 6 to 8 tenants per month, and it's very active strategy. I had
Yep.
no interest in that. It was hard money lending and note lending, and I didn't have the 7 figures it took to get started there. And it was self storage. And self storage jumped out at me because I was like, let me get this right. There's no kitchens, there's no bathrooms, there's no one living in it, and I'm renting someone a box of air. Like, I can get behind that. And then through networking in the local real estate groups, I met my partners, founders of Nomad Capital, Eric and Levi Hemingway, who had a pretty unique strategy of buying old vacant big box retail buildings for pennies on the dollar and converting them into climate controlled self storage. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about half the cost of ground up development and in about a third of the time. And that
Mm-hmm.
leapt off the page at me because that's what I had done with small quadplexes for Airbnb. I bought these small properties with bad long-term tenants in place. Over time, I would move them out, convert that to a different asset class as a short-term rental, and it would 3.5 to 4x the gross potential rental income, which
Incredible.
massively increases the value of the property, allows to recapitalize by refinance if you want. And I realized that it was basically the same thing, just on a bigger scale. And that they're taking a big box, chopping it up into 500 or 600 little boxes and renting them out. So that began our career. And in 2020, we bought an old Kmart building and converted it. And we've done a dozen deals since then, and we're sitting on 150 million in assets under management.
Amazing, amazing. Love it. And that's a great story. And Clint, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the group Nomad Partners Capital, I think,
Correct.
started with all of you being part of that journey at the very beginning. You all started at the same time. Is that
It
correct?
it did. Yeah, it was four of us sitting around a coffee table in a back room of one of the self storage facilities that they had converted previously, a smaller unit. And then the idea of Nomad Capital was born. My partners Eric and Levi Hemingway are a father and son team. Quick anecdote is Eric built his first self storage in 2006. When the market crashed in 2008, he had built it in the middle of a huge development of 3,500 new homes, and new construction on everything completely stopped. So Eric, his wife, Rachel, and their 5 kids decided to take a break while the market turned around, and they bought a sailboat, sight unseen, in Greece, I believe. And
Wow.
what was starting as a 6 month journey turned into a 3.5 year trip of sailing the world. They had their sixth kid, had to stop in Jerusalem and have their sixth kid 6 months into the journey, kept
Incredible.
going, sailed for a total of 3.5 years, eventually sailed down through Africa and then across the Atlantic and landed back here in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we are.
Amazing.
And this concept of being able to live the life that you want because you have a portfolio of commercial assets paying for that lifestyle is the idea that eventually grew into Nomad Capital. And for us, a real estate nomad is somebody that goes where they want, when they want, and does what they want. And they've got that freedom of purpose. So it was four of us sitting around a coffee table. They came up with the name and walked in one day and told us what it was going to be. We identified a Kmart. I was working in medical sales at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I made 15 phone calls to cardiology, surgeon, pulmonologist, electrophysiologist buddies of mine. 12 said yes. We bought an old Kmart building for 1.5 million. We put 2.5 million into it as a stabilized climate controlled self-storage. The valuation is 9 million. And then we all went, wow, this really works. So then we did another Kmart, then another, then another, then another. And I left medical sales and took off my scrubs for the final time in November of 2022.
Congratulations. Wow, it's been a while. It's been a little over 3 years at this point since you left your job.
Yeah.
It's
Some days it feels very fast. And some days when we're trying to get things done, it can feel slow. But yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm blessed to be a small part of an amazing team.
excellent, excellent. Thank you for sharing your background and your bio. Let's unpack a little bit of it so our audience can understand better where you're coming from. So you started with single families and then quickly discovered for yourself the house hacking concept, which worked really well. And then you realized that because you live by the beach, you can actually take advantage of it as a short-term rental and did your own conversion and kind of tested the waters on a duplex, which is amazing. How fast after the duplex did you acquire additional quads? Was it a matter of months or just over the span of several years?
The last one I picked up was in December of 2020. So we picked up 3 quadplexes in 2 years.
Mhm.
The last one was a little bit scary because it was in during COVID, but
Oh,
it was
wow.
over that 2 year time frame. Um, we picked we actually arbitraged the first one, which is I took on a lease on the property as long term from the owner. I turned around and I operated as a short term rental. We paid him first, made the difference. We netted about 55 grand a year off of that. So that helped us build down payments to buy 2 more quadplexes after that, and then go back and purchase that one. So kind of did that one a little bit backwards, but then COVID hit, had some challenges there. I bought a property with 4 tenants in place, bad tenants that hadn't had a rent increase in 10 years. And I was raking drug needles out of the back alleyway. It was a rough one. And there was a moratorium on evictions for non-payment during COVID. The second I went under contract on the property, all 4 of them stopped payment. And it took me almost a year to navigate. I ended up having to play nice, and I got them out of the property by helping them find other places to go, getting a truck to help them move stuff. And I basically lost a year with no rental income and lost a lot of the renovation budget that I had. So it took me a while to navigate that one, but it was during that time frame that I also started building a property management company, which launched in 2021, I believe. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the progression. We kind of saw the pathway. I'm pretty cavalier with my money. When I identify a strategy that works and I want to go after it, I want to go after it quickly.
I
Uh,
can see that.
I've had to, once investors are involved, it has to be a very well thought out strategy, and there can't be any gambles on that. So I had to learn some hard lessons during that time frame. I was quick to hire and slow to fire. I had to learn how to be slow to hire and quick to fire. Um, but those are all, even those lessons from single family houses, and there were a few flip properties in there as well. It all led up to what we're doing now, the heavy value add. It's just a couple more zeros.
It makes sense. And I'm sure that's where your partners come in, including Neil, where, as I mentioned to you guys when I initially met you, you and Neil kind of balance each other out. You have a complementary skill set and you work well together. So that helps a lot. Interesting that you mentioned your strategy with that last quad where you had to wait a year until you were able to empty all 4 units. We had a similar situation with our 9 unit bungalow on Jersey Shore, where we essentially inherited tenants, and the last one just couldn't find a place. The bungalows were in a very bad shape, and the rent was very low, probably not probably, definitely below market rent. And we were planning to do a full gut, but before we could start the gut on all of the units, we needed to make sure that all of the tenants are out. So the last tenant took us at least 9 months until she found her replacement property with the rent that was affordable for her. She was a single person and was not making a lot of money, but we patiently waited. because we knew that that location was worth a lot more, and now we're reaping the rewards of it. We're talking 3 years later, and you're in a very similar situation with that. But Clint, you brought a great point where it doesn't matter what asset you're working on, because the strategy can be applied and replicated from one asset to another. And that's essentially what you're doing with this climate control storage. So correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the storage is climate control because of the climate you're in, which is North Carolina, close to the beach. If this storage were to be, let's say, in Jersey, where I live, it would not have to be climate control. Is that correct?
So that's a great question. And I'll try to provide some education here that may help outside of just what we're doing at Nomad. Um, we're operating in North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia. We look at a couple other states, but primarily the Southeast, where we're having massive population growth and expansion.
Mm-hmm.
When you and I, if you'd asked me 5, 6, 7 years ago what I thought about storage, I thought of low slung metal buildings on the side of a highway and
Yep.
baby boomers and Christmas decorations and bulky heirloom furniture. That's not what's happening anymore. There's been a massive shift in the utilization of this asset class, and I'll
Mhm.
shed a little bit of light on that. The millennial population, unfortunately, in our country right now, is typically not able to buy houses. They are renting. Our renting population is going up and up. We're 9 million homes below where we're supposed to be in terms of supply, and it's keeping the prices high. Interest rates certainly aren't helping as well. The millennial population is now the largest population and segment in the country with 34%. They passed the baby boomers during COVID. They
Wow.
utilize 38% of storage, but they use it in a very different way than what we're used to. The previous self-storage consumer was in and out of the property 1 or 2 times a year, getting Christmas decorations or whatever it may be. The average consumer right now in that millennial population is in and out of the property more than 2.8 times per month. The way
Incredible.
that they're using it is different. If you buy a house, you have a garage, an attic, a basement, depending on where you are in the country. If you're renting, traditionally you're renting based upon the square footage that you get. So
Mm-hmm.
what we're seeing is a millennial population, instead of renting a condo for two bedroom for $1,800 a month, they'll rent a 1 bedroom for $1,300 a month and then get a climate controlled self storage unit for an extension of their closet, extension of their garage. And so that's 150 bucks a month. So if you're doing storage these days, the consumer is changing and what they're putting in it is changing. These are lifestyle items. They don't have as much stuff as the baby boomers did, but think about like the Instagram lifestyle. Like they want lifestyle items. And so these are things like mountain bikes, kayaks, skis, snowboards, bibs, winter clothes that they don't have a place for.
Wow.
So these consumers are popping by at 6 or 7 a.m. on a Saturday to get their snowboard and their bibs and their coat and get out of town. And then they're going
Sure.
to come back on the way home. So for anyone thinking about investing into self storage right now, it needs to be several things. It needs to be safe, secure, well lit, easy access, centrally located, and it needs to be climate controlled. We also have a large population of small businesses that have shuttered their doors over the last few years and are operating out of storage facilities as a micro distribution center. Those people can be in and out of the property 8 to 10 times a week. So
Wow.
that access and the traditional like open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. type deal, that's not what's happening anymore. We're talking about QR codes on the door, touchscreen kiosks, the ability to have access in and out of the property in a meaningful way at any time because that consumer's using it differently. And
Of course.
that's why that model, if you think about an old Kmart building, there used to be 2,000 of them and now they're all gone. But those communities, secondary,
Mm-hmm.
tertiary markets, used to, a lot of times that was a large employer and they have a large residential density population around that area. And everyone in that community used to drive to that location to buy their home goods. And even though Walmart and Amazon have destroyed that space and there's very little appetite for big box retail anymore, that makes the buildings dirt cheap. And it still is in the same community with the residential density that makes sense for all those people that used to buy their home goods there to drive back to the same location and pay us to put their stuff right back inside of it. Right. So it's an inverse flow of that micro economy.
Makes sense. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your clients, your investors. Based on the way you're describing projects, while it's not a new construction, conversion does take a little bit of time. And, my guess would be anywhere between 12 to 24 months. Totally guessing. Feel free to correct me.
That's a great guess. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say this. If anyone's looking for immediate cash flow, you want monthly paychecks, you're trying to replace your income from a job you don't like, I am not the guy and you should not invest with us.
Excellent.
That's
Excellent.
it.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah.
So you are more of a deferred gratification type of people. You force appreciation and you offer value at the end. So give us an idea. So someone gets into this project, you want them to wait, let's say at least 24 months. And at that point, when the property starts cash flowing, do you pay immediately or do you wait a little bit more till you gather the reserves and then start paying?
We've done it both ways. That's a great question. We've started raising the reserves up front and just giving up more equity so that we can start cash flow a little sooner. On average, from the day that we close on the property, our construction team, which is in-house, is going to take an average of about 12 months to build it out. Now, it's going to take, right now, the average is just under 3 years for anyone to do the permitting, entitlement, and rezoning. And then you're breaking ground, and it's a 3-year process to get to the point of an open facility. From the time we close on a building, it's going to take us sometimes less, but an average of about a year to build it out and convert it to a climate-controlled self-storage facility. We can do it for half the cost of ground up because the building's already there, but it takes time. From there, it can take 2 to 3 years, depending on the size of the facility, to fill it up to the point of being cash flow positive. These are big buildings, 100,000+ square feet. So
Sure.
what we do is from the day that our investors put capital in, they are starting to earn a preferred return, but it is back owed. If we started paying right up front, it just means I borrowed more money from you than I really needed, and I'm paying you back with your own capital. So we are
And that's not
developing.
the strategy you're implementing. Sorry
That
for
is
interrupting.
not, absolutely
Yeah,
not.
good.
We are developers. These are development deals. So it's going to take us a year to build it out, 2 to 3 years to fill it up. As soon as the properties become cash flow positive, the capital goes straight back to the investors to catch them up on their back owed preferred return. Beyond that catch up, it's quarterly distributions. And then our strategy is typically at or before 5 years, we're going to do a cash out refinance. So typically we're going to buy a property for 2 to 3 million. We'll put 2 to 3 million into it. We'll be into the whole thing somewhere in the 4 to 6 million range. And as a stabilized climate controlled self-storage facility several years down the road, the valuation is typically somewhere in the 12 to $15 million range, sometimes as high as 17, depending on the market. At that point, we will do a cash out refinance, fixed rate debt, 60% LTV on the max, never variable rate debt. And that will allow us to give everyone a return of capital plus another big chunk on top of that. When we pay out our investors by way of a refinance, it's not a capital gain because we didn't sell anything. So that's non-taxable. The cash flow and preferred return is obviously taxable income, but we do the cost segregation study. We take the accelerated depreciation to offset that. We have a goal of doing the best we can to try to double everybody's money tax-free in 5 years or less. With the current interest rates, sometimes that's more like a 1.8, 1.9x multiplier. But the point is, beyond that, all the investors stay in. We keep the property. We hold it long-term. Self-storage is very good in terms of inflation resistance and good for a long-term hold because everything can change on a month-to-month basis. If we're building things up, making them nice, and then selling them for everybody to get a payday, that's great. And I'm not knocking anyone's strategy, but that makes us glorified house flippers. And the day we stop working is the day we stop getting paid. Remember the goal here. Our goal is to be real estate nomads and to have financial time and location independence. We don't get that way by flipping properties. We get that way by holding them long-term and allowing them to cash flow, which is why right now we're sitting on 150 million in assets under management. We've never sold any of the projects we've syndicated. Now,
Oh, wow.
we know that we will trim the portfolio and we have some properties that we will sell because it helps us with our long-term goal, which is 500 million over the next 5 years and $1 billion in 10. But the idea is we want these investors that have a long-term vision. And if you want anything shorter than that, don't invest with us. And it's not the right place. I hope you learned something about self-storage and can find another operator or do it on your own and have great success with the goals that you and your spouse or partner have for your family. What we are doing is my partners are a father and son team. The son just had his fourth child. I've got two little boys. Neil has a 10-year-old boy. This is generational for us, and we are trying to break this cycle of trading time for money. If that
Love
does
it.
not appeal to you, we are not the right people. For those that do, we're trying to put ourselves in a position where people want to continuously invest with us towards a long-term vision.
Got it. I love it, Clint. Thank you for that breakdown. So, what's the asset that you've been holding the most with this group so far?
So Eric still owns the property that he built from the ground up in 2006.
Oh,
And
wow. And it's still cash flowing and
yep,
and
he's actually doubled the size of it over the last couple years. So still
like,
cash flowing. The one that allowed them to live on that sailboat for 3.5 years and make those memories, he still got it, doubled the size of it. It's still cash flowing and stabilized. We started our first Kmart was a joint venture in 2020, proving concept. We still
sure.
have that one. And then everything else is still in the portfolio. We're starting to look at liquidating one or two of the properties to trim because we know that that's going to increase our velocity.
Of
And
course.
frankly, we're just better than we were a few years ago. And so there's deals that we can recapitalize, take some chips off the table, and deploy that investor capital if they want to reinvest and get better margins. And our construction team is better and faster and a little bit more nimble. And I think that another thing that we're really seeing right now that we're really excited about is self-storage development is really slowing down right now. It's a lagging indicator. The decisions being made 2 years ago, 3 years ago are the properties that are coming online right now. And we're starting to see that new supply significantly slow down because when those interest rates shot up, it didn't make sense for a lot of people anymore. So self-storage supply is down. It's going to be down 15% in 2026. It's going to be down 17% in 2027. And there's a lot of money coming together to jump on self-storage. And so we know that over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be in an environment with a very low supply and a very high demand. At that point in time, I'm sure that there are properties that we will offload, but we want to do it when the rates are down and when things are compressed and people are buying at a 4 cap. And so it puts you in the driver's seat. And we've been able to recapitalize because of the refinance on all the properties that we currently hold. But we know the days are coming where those ridiculous offers will show up again. And at that point in time, maybe it's time to put a portfolio together and liquidate, move forward. And also, right now, we've always passed a lot of good deals to get to those great deals that we can hold forever. We spent the last year and a half tripling the size of our construction department and our project managers. So we have capacity now to start building a few projects for other people and also taking on projects that maybe it doesn't make sense for us to refinance and hold them forever, but we have a capacity to build out several of those and be ready for a potential liquidation over the next couple of years. So we're trying to skate to where the hockey puck is going, right? You don't want to skate to where it is, you want to skate to where it's going. So we're looking at that future demand, trying to put ourselves in a position where we are part of the supply when supply is low and demand is high.
Makes sense. Thank you. Let me unpack a little bit what you mentioned, Clint, for our audience. So you mentioned that the strategy for your team is cash out refi. So when cash out refi happens, the reason the transaction is non-taxable, at least in your case, is because you are returning investors a portion of their principal, so they do not get taxed on the principal. That's number one. Then you also said that you have an in-house construction team, which essentially entails that people that are doing the building and renovation for you are people that are part of your team, that are part of the same vision and the same goals. And that's why it's a lot easier to have the process fine-tuned and run it smoother because everyone is running towards the same objective. And I've heard that time and time and again from multiple operators where, and I know from personal experience, when you have your own in-house team, whether it's construction team or property management team, it's always easier to manage it because that's the team that's under your control and under your supervision and working closely with you, and as opposed to third party contractor. Now, it's not always possible and feasible for everyone to have that luxury. Sometimes you have to hire third party contractor, or at least when you start out you're hiring third party contractor, but eventually long term, you want to come to that point where everything's in house and running under your management, and you know where the team is going and where it's growing. I also like that you clearly define what your investors will get in the investment, and you articulate well that the project takes 2 to 3 years, maybe even longer. So the investors that are coming in with you on these projects have to have the patience to wait out and be able to take advantage of that exponential growth that happens down the line when the facility is built up and cash flowing. So talk a little bit about your investors and what are you looking for in your investors, and also whether that ideal investor has changed over the years because of the concept that you're going, and because it's so different from what everyone else is offering, which is essentially, as you called it, a long-term flip, which you guys are not.
Yeah, completely. And I'll start with, we do ours a little bit uniquely in that we start all of our deals traditionally as 506B offerings, which means available to non-accredited investors, and we are not allowed to advertise what we're doing.
Mhm.
The reason we did that is exactly something you mentioned. We want the people in our company and our friends and family to be invested in this and have the opportunity for this. So we started out our original deals, we only needed to raise maybe $1 or $2 million. And so we started as 506B because people in our sphere, a lot of them, the physicians I work with, which are accredited investors, but a lot of them were local people that we knew and people that we were hiring in the company. We wanted them to have alignment with the goals and strategies. So our project manager and his wife invested 6 figures, and you should see how excited he is when he can find a box of screws that's 1 cent cheaper per screw, right? Because that affects the bottom line. We're in this together, right? So we open up our offerings as a 506B offering. We are allowed to have up to 35 investors that are non-accredited. So we raise capital until we hit that limit. And then we have our legal team convert the property over to a 506C. From
Got
that
it.
point on, we are not allowed to bring on any more non-accredited investors, but it opens us up to being able to do what's called general solicitation. And we can advertise. I can go on podcasts like this and let people know about what we have on. So we want to help those non-accredited investors have an opportunity of where they're going to go. So we just closed out a $10 million fund that has 4 projects in it. And during that process, yes, the avatar for our investor changed because trust transfers, and the people that know us and the surgeons or cardiologists and pulmonologists that I used to work with, it's easy for them to invest. And maybe they call one of their med school buddies and be like, hey, I'm friends with this guy. You should check them out, see what you think. That transfers about once. When you've got to raise $10 million in a fairly short period of time, you're not going to get it from non-accredited investors. And it's hard to do that from your sphere without it taking a really long time. So now you have to get to a platform of advertising. So we do meta ads, Facebook, Instagram. I do a lot of podcast speaking. And now we've got to get to the point where people develop the ability to know, like, and trust us
Mhm.
because we're educating, we're putting the content out there. So we started off with a lot of white coat professionals, meaning physicians mostly. And now that's transitioned to a lot of West Coast people, IT, small business owners, things like that. Traditionally, if you look at where you live, most people either live in a deal state or a money state. Well, we
Yeah.
operate in the Carolinas and the Southeast. Those are deal states. A lot of the capital that we get comes from the West Coast or the Northeast. Those are money states, right? So
Sure.
as we've had to expand our marketing, and that's where that capital's come from. And what started as picking up the phone and calling a handful of people, now we've got over 2,000 people in our approved investor portal. And I've got a list of 65 people waiting on our next deal. Since the
Amazing.
time we close that fund, the next conversion, we've got 3 in the pipeline. I haven't announced anything yet. When we do that, we've got 65 people ready to go. And so that changes things. But it also comes with a responsibility to do what we say we're going to do, communicate, newsletters, monthly updates, video, photos, quarterly financials and reports, investor meetings, and allowing everybody that to make sure that we have the transparency and the ethics to make sure that people see the common vision that we're working on. It's a very long-term goal. So we have to do a good job of helping people with that vision. and frankly, do a good job of, if it's not aligned with what their goals are for their family, being the first one to tell them that. Because if 3 or 4 years down the road they are disgruntled, I'm still the one that has to take that phone call, right? I would rather get that right up front. There's no amount of capital out there that makes it worth it for us to bring on the wrong investment partner that doesn't have the same strategic vision.
100% makes sense. Clint, thank you for that clarification. One of the last questions, and then we'll move to personal questions. Um, I talked to a lot of capital raisers, and they're saying it's been hard to raise capital last year, and it's continuing into this year. Is that what you and Neil are finding? Has it been harder to raise capital in the last year, year and a half, or do you see it differently?
It's certainly, I've been told it's the hardest that it's been since the Jobs Act of 2012 really made syndication available to the masses. I'm young enough in this role that I don't know any better, right? It's certainly harder in the last year because I went from raising capital from people that I have a close relationship with or that know our group to people that don't. So for us, it just required doing the work. And I know that the cost of capital is higher and there's a lot of trepidation and a lot of people are worried. But the reality is, I think your ability to raise capital is a reflection on the team that you have, the communication you put out there, and what kind of deals you're doing. And I think our self-storage conversion deals are unique enough that it jumps out among a sea of people looking for capital. And then it just comes down to making sure we're picking the right investors. And also, multifamily deal, they're going to raise 60, 80, $100 million. I need like 5 to 10 usually for some, sometimes 1 to 2 for a smaller project that's an individual deal, maybe a couple $1 million. For a larger project, I think the next raise is likely to be around 8 million. But this is, I don't have to have the same chops that those guys are pulling off to raise $100 million. And the other thing is we're getting to the point where we're going to start injecting a decent amount of capital back into our investor base. And we think that because of our strategy, a lot of those are long-term investors with a long vision and that they're very likely to be repeat investors. So I think the first million is probably the hardest million. Well, maybe not in our case. I made 15 phone calls and 12 people said yes. So that's probably a bad example. But outside of the people that know you, that first million is probably the hardest. And then the next 5 million is going to be a little easier. The 10 million after that is going to be a little bit easier.
Amazing, amazing. Love it. Thank you for that clarification. And one last point I'll clarify for our audience, which was a theme throughout all of your interview, is that having a focus and a strategy that is focused on a single asset class, single strategy in a specific markets that are identical to one another, and in the markets where you are operating and have boots on the ground is critical and essential step to be successful in this game. So thank you for bringing it out, and I'm glad that you guys are a living proof that it's working out. Much success, continued success. And on that note, how can our audience find you? What are the best ways to connect with you, whether it's social media or email or phone?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. The best way, honestly, is through our website, nomadcapital.us, or feel free to email me, clint@nomadcapital.us. I'm always happy to connect. I believe in relationships and I believe in the law of 100 hours, which is you spend 100 hours learning about anything, that you're going to know more about that than 95% of the rest of the population in the world, which is why I use that windshield time. That's only 18 minutes a day for a year. That's less than the average person's commute. So I believe in educating myself any way that I can. That can come from podcasts, but more often than not, it comes from having a chance to interview people like you, where I learned a lot about some of the strategies we want to employ with raising our kids to be financially responsible. And it also comes from connecting with any investor that has interest or anybody that has questions about self-storage that I might be able to help them with one of their projects.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you, Clint. And one last personal question that we always ask our audience is, how do you like to give back?
So I've got a 2-year-old right now, which is challenging for us to incorporate travel the way that we would like. We're starting to do that a little bit more this coming year. So right now it's coming locally in the form of our church and coaching T-ball and things like that, and trying to be part of the fabric of where we live. I
Nice.
live in a small island community that is not the wealthiest place around, but I grew up lower middle class, one of 6 children. So it's certainly more money around than I ever saw. And I have concerns about raising 2 young boys with that vision of the world. So one of the things that's important is that my wife and I are looking for ways to implement travel into the way that we raise them, which is why that location and time independence is so important, because we want to help them see the world, not just the resorts and the nice parts, but all of it, and people that need help, to try to create a sense of empathy and gratitude. And so as our little one becomes a little bit more stable, we're looking forward to finding a ways to give back, where as a family, it gives us a purpose to have a dedicated dinner once a month, a meeting once a quarter. Hopefully that can turn into a family foundation where it gives us a nucleus to work around as a family, that as we all grow and age together, that we've got a common focus that allows us to talk about something that's just more important than just money, right? We don't want to die with a bunch of things. We want to die with a giant stack of pictures of things that we love, that we did in beautiful places with people that we care about.
I love it, and it's amazing, and thank you for bringing it up because not every family has a purpose and a vision and plans out ahead. I think it's very critical and important, and you brought it up as well, the fact that you and your wife had talked about this and you guys are making plans for the future. Granted, the plans may change or you may deviate from the original plan, but the whole goal here is to continue planning and adjusting and being flexible with your plans, so that as your vision changes and as your finances and other things change around you, you're able to continuously improve, change, and implement your plans. So kudos to you and your wife for doing that, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey as your 2-year-old grows a little bit. And believe me, as hard as it is with the 2-year-olds, I mean, I went through 2 of them as well, myself. Those memories, those times cannot be brought back. So enjoy it while it lasts, and as challenging as it is, because it's a lot of fun. I can't say that it's a lot more fun than dealing with a 22-year-old, but it's just completely different type of fun. Let's put it this way. So enjoy it.
Thank you for that. That's the plan. We're enjoying every day, and the moments we have of frustration, try to keep remembering that, there's going to be a day that we long for this. So we want to try to be living in the moment and creating purpose.
Love it. Love it. On that note, Clint, thank you so much for this absolutely amazing and incredible interview. And I want to say that most interviews run for about 30 minutes. This one lasted much longer than that, but you provided so much value and so much content that I'm sure it's going to be appreciated by our audience. So thank you so much for that. And on that point, until next time, goodbye.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.